What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Digital Engage, and good news is hopefully this is the last one, at least for a while, because next week on July 1st we will be gathering together in the White House at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night, and I'm so excited to see you, and hopefully you bring a friend and we can just hang out and have fun. Like the good old days, but in today, the new days, right? So I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about next week. I hope to see you there. We're going to have a lot of fun. More details to come. Be following us on our Facebook page and Instagram to get all the details as we're heading into this next week. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for it. But why we are here today, while you're watching this video, is to get a word that might encourage or challenge you this week. As we're leading into that. And so I've got a word prepared for us as well. So I want to dive into some scripture for us, just the next few minutes, out of the book of John, chapter 15. You can begin to go look that up if you're watching this on your phone, if you've got a Bible nearby, or if you're watching this on a computer, if you want to use your phone for the Bible app or whatever, you can begin looking up John chapter 15. But I was thinking, we're now getting towards the end of June, and normally my summer plans, I'm excited for several things in the summer, but one of the big highlights every summer for me is our summer camp, the teen camp that we go to. It's been great. The last 2 years we went, I was really excited to go again this year. And that's always for me, if you've been around long, you've heard me share, that summer camp for me is one of those foundational moments in my spiritual walk. The experiences I had at camp, the times I had away while I was a teenager, were foundational for my faith. There were places that I really grew, that God really spoke to me. And so I always look forward to summer camp. And so one of the hardest things about this whole COVID crisis was, for me, the canceling of summer camp. Knowing that we won't get to experience that in that way, that we won't get to do those same things and have those same experience. We won't get to have the cafeteria food all sitting down at the loud cafeteria and the tables together. We won't get to hear a speaker talk about God and do some great praise and worship with hundreds of other teenagers and adults. We won't get to have wacky games outside where there's gross things like squids getting thrown around, or we're just getting wet and nasty from slime and gunk on a big giant water slide. I'm missing all that stuff. I'm grieving for that stuff. I'm lamenting that stuff. And I think if you went back in our videos towards one of the first videos, that was kind of one of the things that I focused on, was this idea that lament is a good thing for believers. And that's still true. But as I was continuing to reflect on my experiences at camp, specifically the last couple of years, I was remembering the theme from 2 years ago. And if you went to camp those 2 years ago, maybe you remember it as well, but the theme for camp in 2018, excuse me, was abide. And that came out of John chapter 15. And so I'm going to read a passage for us here, and we're going to dive in and talk about it just a little bit. But starting in the first verse of John chapter 15, it says this. Jesus is talking to his disciples. He says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that I will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." And Jesus goes on for the next few verses to kind of reiterate what he was just saying, because sometimes the disciples had a hard time comprehending what Jesus was talking about. So he had to repeat himself, right? Over and over and over again until they finally got it, until it finally clicked, until they finally understood what he was saying about this vine analogy, this idea that Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. What does it mean to remain in him, or abide was that theme from camp a couple of years ago. What does it mean to be with him, to stay with him, to be connected to him, right? And if you've helped your parents at all this summer with any gardening outside, or you have in the past, and you know just the basics of gardening, right? I don't have a green thumb. I kill more plants than I grow, but the basics of gardening, right, is that you need to have good soil. and that the plant needs to be put inside that good soil so that it can get nutrients. And periodically that soil needs to be moistured by water. You either need to put water in yourself or you need to have it rain on that, because otherwise it'll dry out and there won't be any more water for the plant to survive and thrive. And the hotter it gets and the more difficult the environment is for that plant to grow in, the quicker it will die without being connected to the source, without having that renewable energy coming into it, that water. We've shared a few weeks ago about Jesus talking about how he's the living water, right? In Jesus' story where he went to the village and he sat down with the Samaritan woman at the well, she had come in the middle of the day to draw water at a time and day when nobody else was there, because she was an outcast from her own village. People didn't want to associate with her. And so she's at the well, she's drawing water, and Jesus sits down at the well and says, "Hey, can you give me something to drink?" And she's thrown off and baffled because Jesus is now talking to her. She doesn't really know who he is, but she knows enough to know that he shouldn't be talking to her. For one, he's a Jew, and for two, nobody else talks to her. So why would this guy be talking to her? And so they begin to have this conversation, right? And this story plays out, and Jesus then goes on to say, if you knew what I'm offering you, this living water, if you drink from this water that I'm offering, you'll never grow thirsty again. You'll never have to draw water from the well again. Of course, he's not talking about never physically needing water again. He's talking about her spiritual life and her connectedness. And so that's just another aspect of what Jesus is talking to the disciples about here in John chapter 15, that for us to be fruitful, to do anything that means anything with our lives, we must be connected to the true vine, to Jesus. Because it's through him we get our nutrients, we get our energy, we get our power, we get the ability to grow fruit and to do new things. And then he tends to us too. One of the other aspects of a good gardening is to prune. Pruning happens when you cut back on alive things in order that it can grow more healthily. You trim it back a little bit so that it has room to grow in a healthy way, rather than continuing to grow kind of haphazardly to the point where it might die, right? I didn't know anything about long hair growing up. My hair's always been short, but since I've been married, one of the things that I've learned about hair, as Chris has shared with me many times, is the importance of her getting a haircut in order that her hair can grow longer. And for me, being a guy with short hair, I say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're cutting your hair, it's going to become shorter, so why don't you just keep letting it grow? And she said, well, after a certain bit of time, what happens is your hair gets split ends. And so it will continue to grow, but those split ends won't be growing healthy hair. It'll just get frazzled and frayed and not be good anymore. So in order for it to grow healthily, you must trim back. Same way here in our lives. For us to bear fruit, we must experience moments of trial, of pain, of difficulty, in order that we can grow more healthy things. And Jesus promises to be with us in there. If we remain with him, he will remain with us. So what fruit are you growing this week? What's the fruit of your life? Does your life look like a bountiful fruit harvest? Some kind of delicious fruit salad with all kinds of different fruits that are just savory and full of moisture and water, and when you bite into that piece of fruit, it's just life-giving? Or are you not really growing much fruit? Or maybe you're just growing one fruit. Or maybe you're growing a little bit of fruit, but not enough to really eat, to really feast on. What fruit are you growing? And why is that? If you want to grow fruit, you must remain with God. So says Jesus. If you're not growing the fruit that you wish you were growing, what steps can you take this week to change that? Maybe it's been a while since you really sat down and you began to read your own Bible. Maybe a good place to start is the book of John. open up the book of John. Don't start at 15. You can go back over this passage again if you'd like, but go to the beginning of the book of John and just read the story. It reads very easy. If you've never read one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John before, John reads very easy. It's a story. He's telling a story about Jesus, right? So if it's been a while since you've spent that kind of time with God, maybe go back and begin to read. Spend some time in prayer. Get connected to the church again. If maybe you've been very connected to these videos and you've watched every single week and you've been waiting for it every single Wednesday, that's wonderful, that's great. But maybe it's time to get connected face to face. Next week we'll be meeting 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. Maybe you haven't been very connected and this is the only video you've really caught, or you've caught bits and pieces of the other videos. Maybe it's time to get plugged back into the community. Maybe it's time to come on Sunday morning and see the rest of the church folk who love you and have been praying for you. I guarantee it. You might not know a lot of the adults' names in our church, but I know them well enough to know that you guys are prayed for and you are loved by these folk. And they care about you. They care about the things that you're struggling with, that you're having difficulty with. They care about your successes and your victories. Maybe it's time to get plugged back in. If you don't feel like you're growing fruit, there's probably a reason. Dig in and get invested in the dirt. I love you, I'm praying for you, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.